My name is Larissa Peters, and I work at Catholic Relief Services. I'm the the digital fundraising manager here, and I have to apologize. I've started getting a cold, so hopefully I won't get a coughing fit. So I'll just give a little profile of CRS and our donor file. We are an international development organization. We're in over 100 countries, and we basically respond to emergencies, work with refugees. Many of our programs are education, microfinance, health, basically like many of the other presenters in their organizations. So the profile of our average online donor is about 62 years of age, if you can believe that. Most of them identify as Catholics, and it is a US audience, basically. Our average online donation runs about $120. We are high for our cohorts. It can be higher than that if it's an emergency appeal. So, and our email file tends to be between about 120,000 to 150, depending on the email ask. So, anyway, in the past couple of years, like many of you, we've been trying to move beyond the basic A/B testing. So, in working with Donor Voice, specifically Kiki, we've identified some areas that we could nudge our email subscribers to not just take an action because of their first name in the subject line, but really to change their behavior over time through just even small adjustments and nudges in our online channels. So mainly email. Basically really what you've seen in these last 2 days. And if you haven't, I strongly suggest watching the recordings. So just a little plug for Kiki and Donor Voice. This year, we've really been doing this in several different ways, but for today, I'll just be talking about it in 2 ways, similar to many of the talks. So that's impact, showing impact of what donors' dollars have done. And just like I'm sure anyone who reads our emails, they're asking, will my help make a difference? And then also changing the copy to help donors better connect in a more empathetic way. So just a little theory, and I think this has been shown in other talks in one way or another. And this comes from a study done by the American Cancer Society when they asked in the control, just will you help us, versus adding a line, will you help us, every penny will help. So the study showed that adding this line to the ask increased response. It didn't necessarily change the size of contributions, but it did increase the number of contributions. So the bottom line is that basically people need to feel like their donation makes a difference, even just a penny. So we tried a variation of this, and this is what David was talking about in his presentation. We asked the question, can we increase conversion by just informing donors how much impact we could have, even with just $10. So when donors see their impact, even with $10, we all want to know we are helping. We want to know that we're creating change, even with just a little bit. So our hypothesis is that supporters might feel that they can have a significant impact, even with just $10. So just some background. For our stewardship and engagement pieces, specifically our Thanksgiving video that we send out, it's a thank you to our donors, thank you for helping. Many organizations do this. You might do this with your organization. We did not have any ask whatsoever. It was just a thank you. But a couple of years ago, I'm not sure why, we just randomly decided to add a donation button at the bottom. Not an ask, just a button below the signature. And we were actually quite shocked to find out how many donations ended up coming in with that thank you video. So for this test, we decided to do it on this, this stewardship piece. You can't see it, it's at the bottom of this email, it's below the signature, that button. So you can see here on the control, it's your basic thank you video. I won't say basic, very well written thank you video. And then thank you video email. And then on the left side, you have $10 equals help for a family of 5. Below, a little extra more language. What does it explain? And then actually you can't. You also below here, below the signature, it says, P.S. Last year, we could help a family of 5 for a whole year with just $10. Thank you again for your gifts. Now on the control, the P.S. said, thank you. It just said, P.S. Thank you again for your gifts. So how did I do? In the results, you can see here, curiously enough, the open rates for the control was 21% versus 17%. I'm just going to flip back real quick. My theory for this is the preview pane. So I'm assuming that when someone sees this in the preview pane, they're thinking this is going to be a fundraising ask. So they see $10 equals help for a family of 5. But if someone sees this part in the preview pane, they're thinking, oh, it's a lovely stewardship piece. I'm going to open that. So that's my theory on that. But even with the lower thank you rate, you can see we had kind of 60% more gifts than the control. Now, I know now everyone's looking at this, but look at this, $14,000 more in the control than the test. However, whenever I see something like this, I'm like, there's got to be an outlier, and there was an outlier, one gift of $9,000. So it does bring the average gift for the control down to about $200. So there is that question, considering, so it makes me ask then, does it mean that, what if we had said $25 helps a family of 5, or $150 helps a community? Yeah, so that would be a question. Moving on to the next test, I'm just aware of time, I don't know. Although this is now my starting time, Kiki, just FYI.
Yes, you have all the time in the world.
Right. Excuse me. So another question would be, what if we depicted the impact into a picture? These people these days, we do know that we try to avoid numbers, especially vast numbers, but what if we showed a number in an image? I mean, people on Facebook like memes, they like word pictures, and will showing this impact in the form of an infographic increase conversions? So here's our hypothesis, and for World Malaria Day, we did a test of, you can see on the left side, showing the, we were able to reduce childhood cases in Gambia by 57%. So there was a little bit of additional language on top of that. I feel like this is actually a draft of our email because this mentions Niger.
Yeah, there are 2 different countries, I think.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I was looking through that. I was like, I would like to assume that that was corrected before I sent that out to 150,000 people. Yeah, so that would not be correct. Yes, and actually, now that I think about it, I remember initially we were going to do Niger, but then we swapped it out for Gambia. So, yeah, anyway. So the results of this, moving on to here it is, it was somewhat insignificant, as you can see. Obviously, I'm sure everybody knows A/B testing does not always have a strongly significant winner. And although it did win by a little bit, so a little bit more gifts than the control did, a little bit more, slightly bit more revenue, a few more unsubscribes though. I get a little bit nerdy when it comes to A/B testing, so I'm like, well, let me look at the segments. So I was looking at it generationally. Now for the millennials, we did send the infographic to all of the millennials. We just made the assumption that they want to have that. It may have been the wrong assumption, I don't know. It actually performed pretty well for our millennials. Our boomers lean more towards the control. Our matures actually lean more towards the infographic. And other segments, our emergency donors actually lean more towards the infographic, but just barely. I don't know what that necessarily means. Maybe emotional emergency donors, more like statistics. I'm not really sure. But I will say, I'm just going to go back to the email real quick. I don't really think that this depicts the impact as well as it doesn't really. It's really more like a meme, so to speak. Not a snarky meme, of course, but it's basically words on a picture. So what if we had portrayed, the difference between 100% to a 57% or something like that? I just feel like I would like to do it again. It is, I don't know how it is for other development agencies, but for us, it's hard to come up with really great statistics because all of our programs touch other programs. For water, we'll touch community, we'll touch health programs. So Kiki knows this. We have a hard time coming up with statistics at times. So anyway, so on to our next test of emotion. And I think David just talked a little bit about this, and talking about numbers, sometimes that can numb donors and numb readers. And so sometimes we have to try to figure out how to help the reader better connect to the story. And talking with Kiki, we often discuss quite a bit about moving donors with emotion, especially towards empathy. And again, here's another slide that I'm sure this has been talked about and all of you guys have seen, talking about the identifiable victim effect. You can see from this graph that how donors have responded to each one. People will give less to a statistical victim, basically statistics about people with problems, and more to the identifiable victim or a specific person who has a specific problem. So for us, we often try to write specifically and less generally when we can, so a specific story. But how do we take this one step further? So especially as an international organization we're in over 100 countries, many of our donors haven't been to Zimbabwe or India or Venezuela, let alone Syria, Afghanistan. So even with amazing writers that we have, it can be hard to help donors connect these stories to their own lives. So how do we do this? This can often be the difference between sympathy and empathy. We want to help our donors move through that. And I'm sure you know already, this is that difference between telling versus engaging. Sympathy is primarily observation, feeling sorry for someone, acknowledging that. Empathy is really feeling those feelings, genuinely imagining and trying to feel what it's like to be in someone else's shoes. This helps lead people to positive action taking. So asking, what will happen if we can ask people to put themselves in the shoes of, say, someone like a Syrian refugee? So the hypothesis is triggering empathy will increase giving. How do we do this? We use simple language, like imagine what it's like. And that's why I have a picture of John Lennon here. It's simple language of imagine all the people. Just a little side note for fun, I ran his song through the readability on readability.com, and his song is actually between the grade levels of grade 2 and 5. So we really want people to connect and using simple language. And then also asking leading questions. What would you do? Where would you run? Who would you call? What would you carry? So let's move on to the testing. So back in 2017, a study was done of American attitudes towards Syrian refugees. So what better email for us to try this empathy test on our annual Syrian refugee update. Unfortunately, this conflict has been going on for over 8 years, and so as long as it's been going on, we try to do an appeal or an update for our donors each year. So for this test, we did 3 versions, and we have the control of our regular copy with the control subject line, "The war is not over. Please give refugees hope." And then the second version with the control subject line and the empathy copy. Imagine you are a Syrian refugee fleeing your war-torn country. Where would you flee? Where would you stay? What would you take with you, limited to what you can carry? What do you feel would be the biggest challenge for you? Forgive me, I can't remember if we had anything below that. I wouldn't be surprised if we did. And then the third version was, we had the empathy copy and with the empathy subject line. So, which one won? Here we go. I'm sorry, so many numbers up here. So first of all, I'll look at, this is actually what surprised me. I thought, what if this were you? I mean, if I was the reader, I would have opened that subject line. That actually suppressed open rates. So the empathy copy was just a little bit less, actually, yeah, a good amount less than both the control and the empathy copy with the control subject line. However, you can see that despite the lower open rates for the empathy subject line, it still won with the empathy copy. And then here is the empathy copy with the control subject line versus the control copy. That was a very high win over the control copy, as well as over almost twice as many gifts as the control. So obviously, what was our response to that? More testing. We didn't put empathy language into everything. We did try it. As a side note, I will say that we did try it in another email for World Refugee Day. It was with another test at the same time, and there wasn't a huge winner or loser. So we will continue to test in our emails, and we actually have more plans for that. But we then wanted to test it into another channel. We find that our audiences in different channels certainly don't react in the same way to the same images or copy. So we decided to try this in Facebook because you can actually do a good amount of copy in there. This is another campaign with our marketing and communications department. And here is on the right side, our control, help farm families battle drought. Very nice copy, an imperative, take action, versus the empathy. Imagine not being able to feed your son or daughter the next meal. And then you can see also the last line, now imagine the joy of seeing your child healthy and smiling. A little bit slightly different copy in that there's imagine the before, now imagine the after. And how did this do? Here it is, our Facebook ads results. Here we have a lower cost per acquisition for the empathy test versus the impact test, slightly more revenue, more gifts, and I know everyone's looking at this, but look at that spend, $22,000 versus $7,000. That was and I was like, oh my goodness, everyone's gonna ask about this. And that is really Facebook's algorithm. They recognize that the empathy ad is doing much better engagement-wise, and so they're going to automatically start pushing spend towards the winner of the two tests. So, all right. So that is the two empathy tests, and where are we on time? So for our future plans, we are looking at, for our impact, looking at possibly testing impact in our Giving Tuesday. So last year, X amount of people gave X amount of dollars and helped X amount of people. Would you consider giving? We definitely we are for sure testing the thank you video again, the Thanksgiving thank you video. So reusing that line and then adding another line, $10 equals help for a family of 5, with how do we help a family of 5? So with food for their children. And then empathy side, we're actually currently testing this in direct mail. We won't know our results for another month or so. And then in our online catalog emails coming up in November. Here's just a snapshot of the copy. I don't have the email built yet, but you can see talking about our health programs versus just like parents were feeling completely helpless when they couldn't help their sick child versus can you imagine having a sick child and nowhere to turn? How helpless would you feel? I'd actually maybe even want to connect it to identity. As a parent, can you imagine having a sick child? This won't be in this, but maybe moving forward. But so even I'm even thinking like, as David talked about in his presentation, how can we combine impact and empathy, or even as Kiki talked about, how can we combine identity and empathy? As we have worked in the past with Donor Voice, and we know our audience is a very religious audience, and so they identify with their Catholic faith. So as a Catholic, I don't know, yada, yada, yada. I'll have to nuance that. But yeah, so thank you very much. That's all I have.
A couple of questions. On
Yeah.
the impact slide that you, test that you talked about, doesn't that pretty much back up what the Essex University test showed?
Which one? Let me go back.
The impact
Oh, wait.
test.
The impact test?
Yeah, I think you're right on there.
Oh, right here?
Yep.
Yeah. Doesn't it back up? Doesn't it back it up?
Doesn't it back up that sometimes the impact works and sometimes it doesn't?
Yes.
Yes. I mean, absolutely. Yeah. Was that a question or a comment?
That was the question. Does it back up what the Essex University tests show, that sometimes impact is very positive and sometimes it isn't?
Yes, I would say, I mean, in this case, I would say it was positive in that we got more gifts, and it didn't work in that it reduced the average gift, which is why my question would be, what if we increased the amount, $25, so. But,
yeah, that was the only, that's why we are repeating this test, because we used a low anchor in this copy. We said $10 could do X, Y, and Z, and that could be the reason why the average gift was so lower. So we don't know if the impact information reduced the average gift or the low anchor reduced the average gift.
mm-hmm.
If it was the anchor, the final decision for this test is that impact is positive. But combining the results from the two tests, I guess we can say that you need to test it because sometimes it works.
Yeah, and the other thing, just to comment on that too, is that this was a stewardship piece, like what if it was a fundraising appeal? It's something else that we could try it on as well, so.
Great. We're on the empathy tests. We have a question of, were there any outlier donations there?
Oh no. That's a great question. I should have anticipated that question before I did this presentation. I anticipated the thank you video question. I would have to look. It was back in March, so I don't have an answer for you. I could follow that up and email Donor Voice.
Was this for the outliers to the empathy test?
Yeah.
We removed them for that, I think.
Did we?
Analysis, yeah.
Okay. Thank you, Kiki.
Huge donation in the control condition, like a 10,000 something.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, which we removed it for the analysis.
Yep. And the number of gifts also goes up there, so strong showing for empathy.
Yeah, yeah.
Yep. Another question, are these numbers real numbers, the $10 or $25 helping a family, for example? Does that directly tie to the impact?
The $10 is that we took from our annual report. The $25, that's just off the top of my head, because I was thinking, what if we had said that? Would it have made a difference? We try to definitely stick to, donor integrity and good stewardship. So I would have to think of something else, like $25 helps a family of 8 or 20, whatever that might be. But the $10 helps a family of 5. That is true. That is a true number.